Hello everyone, welcome to my channel and welcome to another video. So today's video we're going to be talking about probably one of my favorite topics ever, which is all about the gut and the gut microbiome. It's a huge area of research. There's so much new stuff that's coming out all the time. It's an absolutely fascinating topic. So we can talk about that, and at the same time I'm going to be attempting to make sauerkraut for the very first time. And if you don't know what sauerkraut is, it is pickled fermented cabbage, which is going to be full of all that really good healthy bacteria that is going to be great for our gut. So let's see how that goes. So first of all, before we start, let me give you an overview of pretty much everything that I know about the gut and the gut microbiome. So the human body is comprised of about 30 trillion human cells, and written out that is a huge number. Multiply that number then by a factor of 3 to 10, they can't quite decide, and that is how many bacteria that we have living in and on our human body. So essentially what we are a host species to loads of different microbes, loads of different bacteria strains, and they live everywhere. They live inside our organs, our tissues, they live on our skin. So the reason that we have all this bacteria in and around us, because back in the day when the human body was evolving, we had all this bacteria around us and we needed to figure out a way to live together with this bacteria and deal with this bacteria that actually was beneficial for us. So what has then happened is that we have developed a mutually beneficial relationship with these bacteria called symbiosis. Now what I mean by mutually beneficial is they get a benefit from us, from living on us, living in our organs, living in our tissues. At the same time, we get some benefit from them living on us. There's so many absolutely fascinating reactions that go on between the bacteria and ourselves, and they affect pretty much all our systems in our body, from the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, how we digest and metabolize food, our hormones, our mood and our mental health, and of course our immune system. So what I really want to focus on in this video is the gut microbiome, so all the bacteria living in our gut and how that affects the immune system and how this leads to autoimmune and chronic inflammatory disorders. So before I get going on that, let's do the first step of preparing the sauerkraut, which is wash the sauerkraut thoroughly and all the equipment that we are going to be using. So the reason I sprayed this cabbage with that veggie wash stuff that you saw is because I couldn't find any organic cabbage. And if you're gonna make this yourself, it is preferable to make it with organic. It just means that it doesn't have any extra herbicides, pesticides, or any other chemicals on its top layer. So the way sauerkraut works is that there's lots of good bacteria that's already present on the surface of the vegetables. So what we do when we pickle this cabbage, we ferment that good bacteria that is on the surface of the vegetables. So that's also why it's important to make sure that your mason jar is clean, or whatever other container that you're using, so there's no other bacteria present that could also disrupt the natural bacteria that is on the cabbage. So back to the gut microbiome and our immune system. 70 to 80% of immune cells are in the gut. So the gut is hugely central to our entire immune systems and the way that our immune systems have developed. So there's lots of different types of immune cells, and remember, immune cells are cells that are inside your body that are there to protect you from any kind of harmful pathogens or other microbes that are getting into your body. So what they do is they kind of scan around and check for all the different things that are inside you and determine whether they're good or whether they're bad, and whether they should attack or whether they shouldn't. Now, if you have an autoimmune disorder like myself, I suffer from eczema, if you have psoriasis or anything like that, it basically means that we have an inappropriate inflammatory response, meaning we are having a way overboard inflammatory response than what we should do to things that are either not there or just unknown. So now back to the immune cells that are in our gut. They actually sit there and they communicate with the bacteria there to help them determine which bacteria are good and which bacteria are bad. So essentially what they do is they regulate each other in a kind of crosstalk mechanism. So they do this in lots of different ways, but one of the main ways is they do it, for example, if we look at the gut lining. So the gut lining, which is essentially just the lining of the intestines, the large intestines for the most part, there's lots of immune cells sitting inside those cells. When something enters the gut, the bacteria in the gut will react to it. And the metabolites of that reaction, as in the things that are produced from that reaction, that is what the immune cells in the gut lining will pick up and determine whether they should pick it up and put it into the bloodstream, or whether they should block it, or whether they should have an inflammatory reaction, i.e. kill it. Those metabolites are then the ones that circulate in our bloodstream and have an effect on all the different tissues that I talked about earlier. So basically, it's very, very important that the communication between those immune cells and those bacteria are functioning tightly, correctly. If anything goes wrong there, you might be having inflammatory responses to things that you really shouldn't be having inflammatory responses to, or conversely, you are not having inflammatory responses to things that you should be having inflammatory responses to. So it's a very delicate balance between the gut bacteria and the immune cells. Now, how do the immune cells know what is good and what is bad? So we have two different types of immune cells. We have innate immune cells and we also have adaptive immune cells. So innate immune cells are things that are always there. For example, they sit in our skin. If we cut ourselves, they'll always go in to kind of fight infections and make sure nothing gets in. Then we also have adaptive immune cells. So these are the cells that, as you're growing up, depending on the exposure that they get to different types of pathogens, either fight things or they don't fight things. So think about how vaccines work, for example. If you get exposed to an illness once, then after that you will be immune because your body can then recognize those pathogens and know when to fight it. So we also have these adaptive immune cells in our gut. So as we are growing up, the more exposure we have to different bacteria to let the gut know that things are not harmful, the better our immune systems will be and the stronger they will be. So this starts right from the beginning when we are born. There's lots and lots of bacteria in the vaginal canal. So when we are born, if we're born a natural birth and not a cesarean section, then we are exposed already to all these different bacteria that come from the mother and are passed on to the baby. And that is essentially how the kind of the immune system starts to develop. Okay, so I've talked a lot now, so I think it's time for some chopping. Looking pretty good. I realized my mason jar is way too small, so I've now got a bigger one. If you come this far in the video, then I would really appreciate it if you did just click the little like button, and you can subscribe as well if that should take your fancy and you want to see more of these kinds of videos. But to go back to the gut and the immune system, so now let's talk a little bit about what can go wrong. So as we've now established, there's lots of communication between your immune cells and the bacteria in your gut, and this communication system is very, very delicate. So if something goes wrong here, then we can have a lot of problems. So one of the things I mentioned in a few videos back is something called the leaky gut barrier. Basically what this means is that the gut barrier, so your intestinal linings, they become leaky, as in they start letting things into the bloodstream which they shouldn't do and causing issues throughout the body. Now, why would this happen? So the first reason this might happen is that there are gaps in the cells that make up your gut lining. So essentially that just means that there's more space between that things can essentially just shoot through. The second reason is that there could be imbalances in your gut bacteria. And basically what this means is that there is a miscommunication between the epithelial cells and the gut bacteria, which means that you're letting things through that shouldn't be going into your bloodstream. And what then happens is these particles that then go into your bloodstream, they travel around your body, and your immune cells in other parts of your body are freaking out. They don't know what these things are, and they start essentially creating inflammatory responses. These inflammatory responses can happen in all different tissues in your body, one of these being, of course, your skin. One question I often get asked is, why do we get patches of inflammation on our skin? Because if it was something that was traveling through our entire body, then surely we would just have inflammation everywhere and not just in different areas. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail here because I do have another video on it, but I think that definitely has something to do with the dysfunctional skin barrier at the same time. So one little irritation in one spot and all the inflammation was centered there, both from internal and external, and from there it will spread and become more and more distressed and more inflamed. Now it's time for the salt. I am going to wear some gloves for this because it is going to be pretty stingy on my hand if I don't. So while I'm macerating the salt into the cabbage, let's talk a little bit about how I look after my own gut health, and maybe you can take some ideas or some inspiration if you don't already do these things yourself. So the first thing I do is I eat a very wide variety of plant foods, and I eat a lot of fiber. Fiber is pretty much the main thing that your gut bacteria feed off. If you have a low fiber diet, that is going to be an issue, which is why I personally find the carnivore diet absolute insanity. Sorry if you are a carnivore, but that's just my opinion. The idea is that you want to get as much diversity in the different strains of bacteria as possible, and that is really going to be helped by having lots of variety in the different types of plant foods that you eat. So the second thing I do, or I don't do rather, is that I rarely eat processed food. Processed food does absolutely nothing, and if anything, it actually has shown to diminish gut bacteria in somebody's gut. So there was an experiment that was done that I heard about, which I thought was super interesting. Somebody who had a pretty good, diversity in their gut flora, they then had McDonald's every day, all day, every day for 10 days straight. After those 10 days, the diversity of their gut flora had diminished by 40%, and it took them 3 years to get that back, even after resuming their normal diet. So once that bacteria is dead, you have to really, really try hard to cultivate it again, and it's a big old effort. So yeah, really avoid that processed food because it really is harmful to your gut bacteria. The third thing I do is I do occasionally eat fermented foods, although to be fair, I do often buy shop-bought fermented food, which has been pasteurized and actually doesn't have as much good bacteria probiotics as if you make it yourself at home. But I do still have sometimes, if I go out for a drink, rather than having alcohol, I'll have kombucha. I do like having some sauerkraut. Whenever it's an option, I will always choose to incorporate some of that into a meal. The fourth thing I do, or I have done, is that I took a probiotic. So a few months back, I had a lot of digestive issues and I was getting severely bloated from eating mostly sort of beans and pulses and things like that. But it was very regular, and I kind of knew that something was up with my gut bacteria. So what I did is I took a probiotic called Symprove for 12 weeks. And guys, let me tell you, it made such a difference. If you are thinking about taking it and you've got gut issues yourself, I cannot recommend it more. It was just such a game changer for me, and I really can't recommend it enough. And finally, what I do is I do get quite a lot of sleep, and I do regular exercise, which is obviously good for your overall health, but secondly, it is also good for maintaining the diversity in your gut. So as I'm packing it into this jar, I can tell you a little bit about the things that I do that are not so good for my gut health. And I am very aware that these are not good, but I don't know, I still do them. So the first one is that I stress quite a lot, and I think a lot of that is to do with work, and I just generally feel a bit anxious and stressed about work about 75% of the time. So don't really know what I can do about that other than change my job. I can always feel when I have been stressing too much, my bowels get really bad and like loose, and yeah, just digestion just goes a bit off, and it's just not a very pleasant time basically. But yeah, I need to figure that one out. So the second one is that I hate to admit it, but I have been drinking quite a lot of diet sodas recently. So why are diet drinks so bad? It's because they contain artificial sweeteners, and these sweeteners are chemicals that our body has never seen before. This has never been something that we've consumed before, so our bacteria kind of freaks out and does not really know what to do with it, causes all sorts of problems inside your gut. So I really shouldn't be doing it. I am gonna stop. There we go. The third thing that I do, and I try not to do it, but sometimes it's really hard, is that I do take antihistamines, and I also take painkillers. So painkillers I very rarely take, but sometimes when it is that time of the month and it's just like so cripplingly painful, then I do have to take some painkillers, although I usually only stick to 1 or 2. But these are things that are definitely not great for your gut. And then the final thing that I am so guilty of is that I eat too much sugar. Now, this is pretty much the reason why I made this video this week. I know that sugar has always been bad for me. It's bad for my skin. I've talked about this before, but this week other things have started happening where I've realized, shit, I really am having too much sugar at the moment. And those are, firstly, I get a lot of sugar cravings. So if you didn't know this, that actually your gut bacteria have a big part to play in the types of cravings that you get, because your gut bacteria will feed on certain things. So there are certain types of bad strains that will very much feed on sugar and things like that. If it wants more of it, it will make you crave it, as in you, the host species, crave it, so that you eat it, so that it feeds the gut bacteria more. And I've been having a lot of sugar cravings recently. So that's one sign. The second thing is I used to have really bad tinnitus. So if you don't know what tinnitus is, that is when you have a very high pitched constant ringing in your ear. So I had it when I was about 17, 18. And if I think back, it was when I was eating a lot of sweets. I just always thought it was something I was gonna have for the rest of my life, until it went away when I completely switched up my diet, went plant-based, and I thought, great, it's gone. But this week I had like little whispers of it coming back, and I had no idea about this link, by the way, of gut bacteria and tinnitus and things like that. So this was to me absolutely fascinating when I saw that tinnitus was potentially a symptom of having bad gut bacteria or too much of it. And so that is another thing that I am very wary about, because it is the most annoying thing, having tinnitus. And And of course, the final thing that could be doing more is having more homemade fermented food. So back in the day when we didn't have fridges, we used to ferment all our food because it was the only way that things used to keep. Now we really don't do that anymore because we have fridges, so we don't eat enough fermented foods, I'd say. So really do make an effort to make some of your own. We actually made some sourdough, which is quite a process, but it is really good. Yeah, that's a fun exercise that you can do as well at home if you're interested in increasing the diversity of your gut flora. So other things you can be doing to look after your gut health is to create natural fasting periods. Now, you don't need to go overboard with this. It's more about creating larger spaces of time where you aren't consuming or grazing lots of food. When you're doing this, you are letting your gut and your gut bacteria kind of rest, heal itself, and process things in a way that it can't really do when it is constantly digesting food. So you don't need to go overboard with this. The only thing that I kind of really do is that I push breakfast back a few hours maybe after I've woken up, and I might have dinner a little bit earlier in the day so that you might have perhaps an 8 to 10 to 12 hour eating window. Now, you don't need to be super strict with this, but again, it's about sort of minimizing grazing and constantly eating and things like that. But yeah, we don't need to be eating all the time as we are sometimes told. The other thing that you can be doing is having more organic food, and I know this isn't possible for everyone, and I'm extremely aware of that. Even myself, I don't have access to a lot of organic food. I did actually just order one of those organic veg boxes this week, but other than that, in the shops it's pretty much mostly non-organic stuff. I think it is probably better to avoid consuming and ingesting as many chemicals as you can. Of course, if you can't get hold of organic foods, you can get these veggie washes, the ones that I showed you earlier. I think that is perfectly fine as well. Just make sure you wash them. So there we go, it is now packed into the jar. I'm going to leave this now for 3 to 10 days if you'd like to see the result. I will most likely post it on my Instagram if you want to follow me there. I hope you like this video, I hope you find it interesting and informative. Like I said, I find it an absolutely fascinating area of research. I'll link some podcasts and some articles and things down in the description box below. So if you're interested in learning more, then you can do that. In the meantime, please do give this video a like, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Bye!